Long before the Empire existed, before Skyrim was divided by the Civil War, and before most of the cities we know had even been built, there was Alduin, the World Eater. To most players, Alduin is simply the main antagonist of Skyrim, the enormous black dragon who attacks Helgen, resurrects the dragons, and eventually threatens the entire world. But Alduin's story began thousands of years before the events of the game. He was worshipped as a god. He ruled over both dragons and men. He fought one of the oldest wars in Skyrim's history, and according to ancient Nordic belief, his ultimate purpose wasn't even to conquer the world. It was to destroy it. So today I want to go back to the very beginning, to understand where Alduin came from, what he was supposed to become, and how the most powerful dragon in Skyrim became the World Eater. Determining exactly when Alduin was born is difficult. Dragons in the Elder Scrolls aren't normal creatures. They don't reproduce or age in the same way mortals do, and their existence is deeply connected to time itself. And at the center of that connection is Akatosh, the dragon god of time. Alduin repeatedly describes himself as the firstborn of Akatosh, suggesting that he holds a position above the other dragons. But Alduin's identity becomes more complicated when we look at the ancient Nordic religion. To the ancient Nords, Alduin wasn't simply a powerful dragon. He was the World Eater, a force associated with the end of the world itself. According to Nordic tradition, Alduin would eventually consume the world at the end of the current cycle, and from that destruction, another world could eventually begin. This means Alduin may have originally had a legitimate purpose within the natural order. He was destruction, the end of time, the final chapter of the world. But at some point, Alduin apparently became interested in something else: power. Instead of simply fulfilling his role as World Eater, he began ruling over mortals, and eventually he became the most powerful dragon on Earth. Dragons naturally value power and domination. Paarthurnax describes the desire to dominate as something deeply embedded within the dragon nature, and among dragons, Alduin stood at the top. He was stronger than the others, more feared than the others, and because of this, many dragons accepted his authority. Among Alduin's most important followers was Paarthurnax. Long before becoming the peaceful master of the Greybeards, Paarthurnax was one of Alduin's greatest lieutenants. He himself admits that he committed terrible acts during this period. And under Alduin, the dragons established their domination over the ancient humans of Skyrim. But they didn't govern mankind directly. Instead, they had servants, the dragon priests. Thousands of years before Skyrim, humans worshipped dragons. This religion became known as the dragon cult. The dragon priests acted as intermediaries between the dragons and their human subjects. They possessed enormous political and religious authority, and many of the ruins we explore throughout Skyrim were once connected to this civilization. Today, these places are tombs, but thousands of years ago, they were temples, cities, and centers of power. The dragon priests themselves were among the most powerful individuals in ancient Nordic society. Men such as Hevnorak, Otar, Ragot, Nakrin, and Morokei ruled in the name of the dragons, and above the entire system stood Alduin. This period represented the height of his power. He had an army of dragons, he had human servants, he was worshipped, and very few mortals could possibly challenge him. But the dragon cult became increasingly oppressive. The priests ruled brutally, the dragons demanded obedience, and eventually, humanity rebelled. The rebellion against Alduin became known as the Dragon War, and the humans initially had one enormous disadvantage: they couldn't fight like dragons. Dragons possess the Thum naturally. Their language itself carries power. When a dragon speaks certain words, it isn't simply communicating, it is imposing its will upon reality. Fire, frost, force. To dragons, debate and combat are almost indistinguishable. Humans had no equivalent, and because of that, Defeating Alduin's armies seemed almost impossible, until Alduin suffered perhaps the greatest betrayal of his life. Pathornax turned against him. According to Pathornax, the goddess Kain instructed him to help humanity, and so one of Alduin's own lieutenants taught humans how to use the Thum. This completely changed the war. For the first time, humans could use the language of dragons against them. Warriors capable of using the voice emerged. Dragons began to fall, and Alduin's seemingly permanent domination began to collapse. But defeating ordinary dragons was one thing. Defeating Alduin was another. He was still far more powerful than the others. So humanity created something specifically designed for him, a weapon that no dragon could fully understand. The Dragon Rend. Dragon Rend wasn't a normal shout. It had been created from humanity's hatred and desperation during the Dragon War. Its concepts were mortal, finite, and temporary. Three ideas that humans understand instinctively. We know that we will die. We know our lives are limited. Dragons don't. They are immortal beings. Their relationship with time is completely different from ours. And because of this, Pathornax explains that dragons cannot truly comprehend Dragon Rend. When used against them, the shout forces them to experience mortality. For a moment, an immortal creature is forced to understand what it means to die. And with this weapon, three legendary Nord heroes prepared to face Alduin. Hakon One-Eye, Felder the Old, and Gormlaith Golden-Hilt. Their battle would determine Alduin's fate for thousands of years. But around the same ancient period, something else had appeared in the world. Someone who possessed the body of a mortal, but the soul of a dragon. Miraak, the first known Dragonborn. Exactly when Miraak received his powers, and why, remains unclear. Perhaps he was meant to become a weapon against the dragons. Perhaps Akatosh had a greater purpose for him. But what we do know is that Miraak lived during the time of the dragon cult. In fact, he had once been a dragon priest himself, and unlike the other humans fighting in the Dragon War, Miraak possessed something extraordinary. He could permanently absorb the souls of dragons. This potentially made him one of the greatest weapons humanity could have had against Alduin, and the ancient Nord heroes apparently knew it. According to Miraak himself, they approached him and asked for his help in defeating the World Eater. But Miraak refused. He had no interest in becoming humanity's savior. By then, he had already begun pursuing his own ambitions, rebelling against the dragons and seeking greater power for himself. And so, when humanity finally confronted Alduin, the first Dragonborn wasn't there. Hakon, Felder, and Gormlaith would have to face the World Eater without him. The three heroes confronted Alduin at the throat of the world. Using Dragon Rend, they were able to force him from the sky. And for perhaps the first time in his existence, Alduin experienced vulnerability. But Dragon Rend wasn't enough. Even with their new weapon, the heroes couldn't truly defeat him. Gormlaith was killed during the battle. Hakon was wounded, and the situation became desperate, so Felder used their final weapon, an Elder Scroll. Rather than killing Alduin, the heroes used the Elder Scroll to cast him forward through time. Alduin disappeared, and suddenly his empire had lost its ruler. Without Alduin, the dragons gradually lost the war. Many were hunted down, others disappeared into remote regions. Some were buried. The dragon cult collapsed. Its temples became ruins. Its priests eventually became little more than legends and undead guardians of forgotten tombs, and mankind reclaimed Skyrim. But Alduin wasn't dead. The ancient heroes hadn't destroyed him. They had simply removed him from their time. For thousands of years, the world continued without the World Eater. Kingdoms rose and disappeared. The first era began, then the second, then the third. The Septon Empire rose and fell. Oblivion opened. The Mede Empire took power, and Skyrim eventually descended into civil war, all while Alduin remained lost somewhere within the currents of time. And while Alduin remained lost, the world continued without him. Merethic disappeared from history, but he wouldn't be the last Dragonborn. Over the following eras, other Dragonborn figures would appear. Some became warriors, some became rulers, and eventually entire dynasties of Dragonborn emperors would sit upon the Ruby Throne. Names like Alicia, Remon Cyrodiil, and much later Tiber Septon would become some of the most important figures in Tamriel's history. Empires would rise, empires would fall, the Septon bloodline would eventually come to an end, and the world slowly forgot the ancient war against Alduin. But the World Eater wasn't dead. He was still somewhere beyond the normal flow of time, waiting for the moment when the Elder Scroll would finally return him to the world. And when that moment came, another Dragonborn would be waiting for him. The last Dragonborn. In the 4th era, 201, Alduin reappeared in Skyrim, and this is where the events of the game began. One interesting thing about Alduin's return is the difference in perspective. For the people of Skyrim, the Dragon War happened thousands of years ago. For Alduin, the battle against Hakon, Felder and Gormlaith may have effectively just happened. He had been thrown forward through time, and now he had found himself in a completely different world. His priests were gone, his empire had disappeared, his dragons were dead, humans ruled Skyrim, and almost nobody worshipped him anymore. So Alduin began rebuilding. One of Alduin's greatest abilities is his power to resurrect dragons. Across Skyrim, ancient dragon burial mounds contain the remains of dragons killed thousands of years earlier. Alduin traveled between these burial sites and restored his fallen followers. The Dragonborn eventually witnesses this personally at Kynesgrove. There, Alduin resurrects Salokonir. He speaks to the dead dragon. Its skeletal body emerges from the earth. Flesh begins forming around its bones. Its wings return, and within moments, a dragon that had been dead for thousands of years is alive again. This explains the sudden return of dragons throughout Skyrim. Alduin is rebuilding his army, dragon by dragon. But Alduin soon discovers something else. There is a Dragonborn alive. The last Dragonborn represents something extremely dangerous to Alduin. Normal warriors can kill a dragon's physical body, but the dragon's soul survives. That's why Alduin can resurrect them. A Dragonborn is different. When the Dragonborn kills a dragon, they can absorb his soul. That dragon is truly gone, and as the Dragonborn grows stronger, Alduin begins losing more and more of his resurrected followers. Eventually, the Dragonborn meets Patronax, Alduin's former lieutenant. Thousands of years after betraying him, Patronax is still helping humanity fighting his old master. And through an Elder Scroll, Dragonborn witnesses Alduin's ancient battle at the throat of the world. There, the Dragonborn learns Dragonrend, the same shout that had once been used to defeat Alduin. History begins repeating itself. Alduin returns to the throat of the world, but this time, instead of Hakon, Felder, and Gormlaith, he faces the last Dragonborn. Dragonrend is used against him again. Alduin is forced to land, and the two fight. For the second time in his existence, Alduin is defeated at the exact same location, but again, he survives. Alduin escapes Skyrim and retreats somewhere the Dragonborn cannot easily follow. Sovngarde, the Nordic afterlife. And there, we discover what Alduin has been doing with the souls of the dead. Alduin hides Sovngarde beneath a supernatural mist. The souls of the dead Nords become lost within it, unable to reach the Hall of Valor, and Alduin hunts them. He consumes the souls of the dead to increase his strength. This gives his title of World Eater a much darker meaning. Alduin isn't merely a dragon destroying settlements. He's a creature capable of feeding upon souls in the afterlife itself. And after his defeat at the throat of the world, Sovngarde becomes his sanctuary, but the Dragonborn follows him. With the help of the dragon Odahviing, the Dragonborn reaches Skuldafn. From there, they enter a portal to Sovngarde, and Alduin's final battle begins. There's something strangely poetic about Alduin's final moments. Thousands of years earlier, 3 humans had stood against him. They failed to kill him, but their souls eventually reached Sovngarde, and when the last Dragonborn arrives, they're still there. The same 3 warriors who fought Alduin thousands of years earlier now have one final opportunity to finish their battle. Together with the Dragonborn, they clear Alduin's mist from Sovngarde. The World Eater descends. Dragonrend is used once again, and the four warriors attack. This time, there is no Elder Scroll. There is no escape through time. There is nowhere left for Alduin to run, and eventually, the World Eater falls. His body begins to burn, his physical form disappears, and Alduin is defeated. But something strange happens. Whenever the Dragonborn kills another dragon, their soul can be absorbed. But Alduin is different. The Dragonborn doesn't absorb his soul. Instead, Alduin's body disappears into the sky. And this raises an important question. Did Alduin actually die? The game intentionally leaves some uncertainty. Even Paarthurnax doesn't give us a definitive answer. And considering Alduin's role in Nordic mythology, there is another possibility. Maybe Alduin cannot permanently disappear. Remember, Alduin wasn't originally supposed to conquer Skyrim. His mythological role was to consume the world at the end of time. Perhaps his defeat simply prevented him from ruling the current world. And when the true end eventually comes, the World Eater may return to fulfill his original purpose. Alduin's story spans thousands of years. He began as the firstborn of Akatosh, a dragon with a place in the very structure of time. He became the ruler of dragons, then the ruler of men. He created an empire built around the worship of his kind, and for generations he seemed unstoppable. But his own servants eventually rebelled against him. His brother betrayed him. Humanity learned his own language and turned it into a weapon. And when mortals discovered they couldn't kill him, they threw him thousands of years into the future. When Alduin finally returned, everything he had built was gone. His temples were ruins. His priests were dead. His dragons were buried beneath Skyrim. His empire existed only in history books, so he tried to build it again. He resurrected his dragons, he challenged humanity once more, and once again, he lost. Only this time, there was no future for him to escape into. The ancient heroes who had defeated him thousands of years earlier were waiting in Sovngarde, and together, with the last Dragonborn, they finally completed a battle that had begun in the Merethic Era. But whether that was truly the end of Alduin, we don't know, because perhaps the most terrifying possibility is that Alduin was never supposed to die at all. Maybe the World Eater still has one final role to play, and if the ancient Nords were right, one day, when the final age of the world comes to an end, Alduin may return, not as king, not as a conqueror, but as what he was always meant to be, the World Eater. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more like this, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me keep going. Until next time.